Okay, guys, I'm getting ready to head to work. I'll take you with a walk with me to work, and we can talk some more. Leave comments below, any questions you have. I only take positive stuff. I don't take like Kevin Leandro harassing me or Stormy. So I just want to talk about teaching your kids about God. Many people will say, oh, just tell them about the gospel and that's good enough. No, you want the whole counsel of God. And right now we're in a battle, in a cultural battle. And I think a lot of the problems have come from number one, the home, and number two, um, society doesn't have good role models in the church. We need churches and homes to be much stronger. So, for example, right now we have women pastors in churches. I have talked to my sons about this, and we have gone over scripture back and forth and debated about this. And I have, there's liberal churches over here, and I've gotten in there pretty deep. You see all these verses about, oh, well, Phoebe was a deacon, or, Priscilla and Aquila, they taught the gospel together. And so what? They never had, there was never an official role for a woman that I can ever think of in history that's biblical of being a woman pastor. Where is it? I think it's a fad right now. I think it's a cultural thing. It's not biblical. We see verses, that a woman is not to have spiritual authority over a man. She's not to be teaching him. A man is supposed to be working in the Bible, studying the Bible, understanding it. And even if he's wrong about some things, I mean, obviously you have to, have your own conscience and study the Bible of what you believe. But your husband, as a leader, he's supposed to be a leader and study the Bible so that, he can lead well. So it talks about how Adam and Eve were created, and it wasn't Adam who was deceived, but it was Eve. And yes, it was Adam who disobeyed, but still, he wasn't deceived. It doesn't say he was deceived. It says he listened to his wife. And so, it talks about how women are, back in the day, they wore head coverings. Never were, women were not educated back then. And Paul does not argue this on education, because if he did, the disciples would not have been qualified because they weren't educated men in the sense of having an education. So we see a lot of women saying, well, women were not educated then, now we are, so we should be pastors. No, it's unnatural. And my biggest, I guess, not just the Bible, where it says in Timothy and Titus, these are the qualifications for a pastor, that he's to be married to one woman. How do you debate that one? I even went to one of the churches, and they had like a co-pastor woman, and then they had like, well, she's not just like a pastor, but when her husband's not around, she preaches. I'm like, I'm out of here. I will never go back to those kind of churches. And unfortunately, we have some of these in the pregnancy centers. Some of the people who work in pregnancy centers go to these type of churches. And, it's just, where do you get this? Back in the day, women were busy having children. There was no contraception. So if she's busy taking care of a big family, I wonder, she had a hard enough time taking care of her family and all her kids. So when would she have time to even serve in the church? I think just serving in the church is a lot of work. You would have to, in my opinion, to do a good job serving in the church, would pretty much have to wait until your kids were older back in the day, probably. That's why I think it says the older women are to teach the younger women. Older meaning the women who have already had families, they've been married a while. These are the type of women. When I see young women in the church teaching, I think some people are like, oh, well, they just have a gift. Well, that's great, but still it says older women. Older women are those who have raised a family. I'm thinking they've had a lot of children, not just, one or two, but they've had a good amount of children. They have a lot of practicality to offer. They are these type of women, and I think these type of women are very rare nowadays. I think we need more women who need to go back home. And I know people won't like this, but I think more women need to be barefoot and pregnant. And what I mean by that is I don't mean that she can't have a life and do things and exercise and educate herself and, you know, do these things. But I think women are fish out of water. I see nothing wrong with a woman working. I think she's working for her family. That's great. But the women are fish out of water who are actually trying to be pastors. And it's not biblical. And when you say, well, I'll just go to this church and get past that, I don't think you really can. I think the whole church is screwed up, honestly, to be going to a church with a woman pastor. So women back in the day were busy at home. I know my grandmother had 10, and, you know, not only was she busy, but when women were uneducated, they were not educated enough to be a pastor. Yeah, maybe they're intuitive and they're smarter in some areas than men, but it's still, when you're talking about the Bible, the most serious job, one of the most serious jobs in the world is being a pastor. So you have to be extremely highly qualified, and you do have to be a man. And men are the leaders. Men are the ones who were the ones at the beginning with Adam. The very fact that Adam was born first tells you right there that there's a leadership, there's an order. You know, women are made from men. They're made from their rib. The first woman was made from the man's rib. It's not below him or above him, it's by his side. But again, it's a woman's role and joy to be under a man, a godly man. So that right there, I mean, how could you even be a wife and be a pastor? You would need to be busy being a wife. So again, there is no such thing as women pastors. So if you're in a church that has them, I would just say get out of there as soon as possible.